In the summer of 64 AD, the center of the Roman world was an inferno. Legend says while the flames flickered against the hills, Emperor Nero stood on his balcony, plucking a lyre and singing of the destruction of Troy. We know him as the man who murdered his mother, Agrippina, and executed his wife to marry his mistress. The ruler who rounded up a small religious sect called Christians and fed them to hunting dogs for public entertainment. For nearly 2,000 years, this image of Nero as the ultimate cinematic villain has been treated as objective historical fact. But the details of this story often collapse under scrutiny. The fiddle didn't exist yet, and when the Great Fire actually broke out, Nero was 35 miles away in the coastal town of Antium, rushing back only when he heard the city was in danger. The image of the crazed performer was built on errors like these. This history was preserved by the survivors of his reign, the elite class that had every reason to ensure he was remembered as a monster. Nero took the throne at just 16 years old. Initially, his government was managed by the Stoic philosopher Seneca, who steered the teenager toward a surprisingly stable administrative path. Historians call this early period the Quinquennium Neronis. During these 5 years, Nero slashed public taxes, implemented new civil rights for slaves, and banned the most violent, blood-soaked contests from the public arenas. This chart of his early currency reforms shows his real priority. By manipulating the weight of the denarius and the aureus, Nero was able to fund a massive social safety net, building a direct, almost cult-like bond with the common people. He leaned into this popularity by presenting himself as a sun king. He grew his hair in long, Greek-style waves and appeared in public as a charioteer and musician, effectively styling his public persona as the god Apollo. In Nero's Rome, a few hundred aristocratic families were completely outweighed by 1 million common citizens. To those masses, an emperor who sang and acted was a celebrity hero. But to the Senate, these performances were a degrading spectacle. They saw an emperor on stage as a breach of every tradition that kept the elite in power. Nero's artistic life was a political weapon. By turning himself into a popular icon, he stripped the Senate of their role as the keepers of Roman culture and authority. That strategy worked until the Great Fire of 64 AD. The disaster was a catastrophic PR crisis, threatening the very public support Nero had spent a decade building. Nero reacted with massive relief efforts. He opened the city's public monuments to house the homeless and ordered emergency food supplies to be brought in from the countryside to prevent a famine. But he followed these efforts with a massive political mistake. He seized hundreds of acres of the burned city center to begin construction on the Domus Aurea, a sprawling, opulent, golden house for himself. The Senate weaponized the project. They convinced a grieving public that the fire hadn't been an accident at all. They claimed Nero had started it specifically to clear the land for his new palace. As the rumors grew dangerous, Nero's survival instinct kicked in. He needed to deflect the accusations onto a group the public already hated. He settled on the Christians. At the time, they were a marginalized fringe group, already viewed with deep suspicion by the Roman mainstream for their refusal to participate in traditional civic religion. The subsequent executions were a ruthless, calculated move to shift the blame. Nero used the blood of a fringe group to maintain his own political stability. By 68 AD, the military had revolted. Declared a public enemy by the Senate and abandoned by his guards, Nero committed suicide. The Senate responded with a decree of damnatio memoriae, a systematic erasure of his existence. They ordered his name chiseled off public buildings and his statues smashed or reworked into other figures. Yet the elite hatred didn't match the feelings of the common people. For years, anonymous mourners left flowers at his tomb in the middle of the night. His popularity outside the capital was so strong, several false Neros emerged in the following decades, each claiming to be the returned emperor, finding thousands of supporters ready to follow them. But the people who loved him didn't write the history. Our primary accounts of his reign come from men like Tacitus and Suetonius, writers with direct ties to the senatorial class that Nero had spent his life humiliating. In their hands, a strategic populist was rewritten as a senseless madman. They buried the details of his tax cuts and social reforms under a mountain of stories about his debauchery and the fire. Nero was a ruthless ruler who killed to keep his throne, but his story remains the ultimate warning about historical memory. Emperors may control the present, but the surviving